Good morning. I hope everybody is having a very blessed day. This video is pretty much for those of you that are kind of waking up, that aren't completely awake or haven't been awake for a long time. If you are awake and you have been awake for a long time, sometimes just watching stuff like this can jar something that you're thinking about or whatever. God works in weird ways. So don't ever discard anything. Okay. Like I always like to say, there's truth in everything, and we need to look at everything. So I'm going to play a couple things for you here, real quick. If you can join me at 9:30, I will be reviewing John's information, and I hope you enjoy this. Listen, learn to discern, trust God, and trust your gut. Here we go.
As of tonight, there are thousands of U.S. citizens, Americans, trapped in Afghanistan. They can't get to the airport in Kabul because the roads to the airport are controlled by the Taliban. Now, the U.S. government allowed that to happen. Joe Biden's on vacation, so he can't explain how he allowed that to happen. But today, the White House press secretary said right out loud that the Biden administration will not guarantee the evacuation of Americans stranded in Afghanistan. Sorry.
Can you offer any guarantee to the Americans and Afghan allies that if they remain there past the end of the month, U.S. troops will help them evacuate past the end of the month?
Leisha, our focus right now is on doing the work at hand and on the task at hand. And that is day by day, getting as many American citizens, as many SIV applicants, as many members of a vulnerable population who are eligible to be evacuated to the airport and out on planes.
Notice how she puts all three together. Americans, special visa applicants, vulnerable population. What the hell is that? You know who's vulnerable is Americans who are trapped in Afghanistan right now. They're American citizens. The American government exists to help American citizens, not to help vulnerable populations, whatever that is. That's a definition that changes depending on which interest group is in power. No, it's Americans. That's the point. It's the American government. But nobody cares. Our leaders are telling us that what really matters is importing tens of thousands of Afghan refugees into the United States before we've even evacuated all of the Americans who are stuck there. Now, keep in mind, these aren't just translators that they want to import, people who've loyally served the U.S. military or whatever. It's anybody in Afghanistan who wants to come here for the free healthcare. Who's in favor of this? Well, on the record, 46 U.S. senators, 43 Democrats, and 3 Republicans just called on the Biden administration to, quote, create a humanitarian parole category for, quote, Afghan women leaders, activists, judges, and other public figures to quickly and efficiently relocate to the United States. Brian Kemp, the kind of pathetic governor of Georgia, he's a Republican apparently, just announced he wants Afghan refugee camps in his state. Okay. So, of course, the media is completely in favor of this. They hate the population of the United States. CNN is accusing anyone who doesn't want this of being a racist. Though, by the way, have you seen the people who live in Afghanistan? A lot of them are whiter than I am. It's nothing to do with race. It has to do with putting American citizens first, period. But they don't get that. It's not even a category that makes sense to them. Politico this morning read a symposium on how we can help Afghanistan as if we owe Afghanistan a lot. We've helped Afghanistan a lot. Not simply by spending more than $1 trillion there, where'd that money go? But also by letting an awful lot of Afghans move here. More than 100,000 special visas to residents of Afghanistan and Iraq in the past couple of decades. We've issued a total of 300,000 green cards to residents of those two countries. Now we're told that's not enough. We're just hard-hearted or something. We don't take enough immigrants. This country is getting so volatile and divided. Maybe we have a moratorium on any new people coming in until we can sort out our own problems, till we can learn to get along with each other. And after we have brought all of our Americans home. Sean Parnell is running for Senate in the state of Pennsylvania. He was an infantry platoon leader during the war in Afghanistan. He worked with an Afghan interpreter for more than a year before that interpreter helped terrorists plant an IED that killed one of his men. It's a complex subject. He knows it very well, and we're happy to have him on with us tonight. Sean, thanks so much for coming on. Look, this idea that vulnerable populations, whatever the hell that means, should get pride of place are more important than American citizens trapped in Afghanistan? I don't think I've ever seen anything that reveals their priorities more clearly.
Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me, Tucker. And if you want to help save this country, go to parnellforsenate.com. So look, we should not have a single conversation about what happens with refugees in Afghanistan until we evacuate American citizens first. That should be our number one priority. The situation is urgent, and we have to get our people out of there before the Taliban takes us hostage. Look, Tucker, I was in Afghanistan for 485 days, 85% casualty rate in my platoon. Some of my men were wounded twice. We worked with an Afghan interpreter for over a year. He was on every mission with us. He was on every fight with us. And one day we got tasked with an observation post to watch info routes from Pakistan into Afghanistan. My platoon that day rolled up onto the hill. We wondered why the Afghan villagers all around that hilltop were watching the platoon. Rolled up onto the hill. One of my trucks hit a plastic Italian TC-6 anti-tank mine. It wounded 4 of my soldiers seriously and killed somebody in my platoon. After that mission was over, during our after-action report, we found out that our interpreter, who had been with us every step of the way, someone who we thought was our friend, we learned that he was working with an Iranian IED cell in Pakistan and coordinated the placement of that mine, which killed one of my troops in a devastating attack. Tucker, just because an Afghan works with us and is friends with us does not actually mean they're safe to bring here. And this is precisely why we cannot bring 30,000 unvetted Afghan refugees to the United States of America. It's an irresponsible policy. And quite frankly, I can't believe we even have to have this conversation. American citizens have to have the priority. They have to be the priority.
Yeah, they're not, though. And something happens in the brains, particularly these middle-aged Republican leaders. Their brains go soft. Low testosterone may be part of the cause. And they decide that they, every dumb idea they have to kind of cringe and, oh, that's okay. You know what I mean? The governor of Arkansas is like this. The governor of Georgia, like, what is wrong with these people? Why don't you stand up for American citizens? It's not hard.
What I can't wrap my mind around, Tucker, is that we have talking heads, media personalities, and politicians trotting out 20-year-old foreign policy arguments. The idea that we have to fight them there to keep from fighting us here. What happens in Afghanistan doesn't stay in Afghanistan. Tucker, these are not foreign policy arguments. These are arguments for wars in countries at any time, in any place, for an indeterminate amount of time. Think about it. What happens in Africa? It doesn't stay in Africa. What happens in Iraq doesn't stay in Iraq. So I'm tired of these arguments. Our politicians, our leaders have to be more careful with America's sons and daughters. They're the best of us, and we need to take care of them.
Amen. There's an ocean separating us from the rest of the world. Let's use it. Sean Parnell, I appreciate you coming on tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Tucker.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to.
Okay, so there's the first one. Discern for yourself. Always listen. And if you're not sure what you heard or you have questions, listen again. Information and truth is everywhere, okay? So let's go ahead and play this next one for you.
He looks like Alvin from the Chipmunks. All right, it's time once again for...
Great job there, Joe.
So, within hours of the Taliban seizing control of Kabul, the stories of ghoulish behavior toward women erupt. They make Andy Cuomo look like Andy Williams. Turns out, surprise, they aren't an enlightened bunch. They're not only stuck in the Dark Ages, they prefer everyone else join them there. So they have that in common with the Green New Deal. But it may get worse. Their idea of women's rights is letting her air out her burqa once a year. However, we've been told by the press this is a kinder, gentler Taliban. So what does that mean exactly? They only partially behead you? They only throw gays out of an 8-story window, not a 12-story one. Did you see how one Taliban leader freed from Gitmo by then President Obama is back on the job? And I don't mean as a tenured professor. We held on to him and then let him go. We probably fed him better than his fellow fighters. He's the only terrorist in the group with type 2 diabetes. Compared to the hell on earth they created back home, Gitmo's a spa weekend on our dime. All that's missing are the conjugal visits from his favorite goat. It's not like the goat's gonna write letters. And they don't get this in Afghanistan. So you've seen this picture of hordes of evacuating civilians packed into a cargo plane. You're staring at that in disbelief. How is that even possible? Meanwhile, Spirit Air is saying, we're getting some ideas here. So here's an analogy. There's a pack of wolves outside your door waiting for you to leave so they can devour your grandmother. Maybe before you leave, you kill the wolves. You don't just go, see you, Granny, best of luck with the wolves. Unless maybe she stiffed you this year on that $5 in your birthday card. But this ain't armchair quarterbacking. I'm not tall enough to be a QB. And secondly, what's an armchair? But given it was American blood and treasure lost, we need to hear the truth. Here's one vet unleashing reality on a soggy Brian Williams.
He owned his decision. He owned the fact that, as he put it, the buck stops with him.
I hope he gets to own their deaths too. I feel like I watched a different speech than the rest of you guys. I was appalled. There was such a profound, bold-faced lie in that speech. The idea that we planned for every contingency. I have been personally trying to tell this administration since it took office. I've been trying to tell our government for years that this was coming. We sent them plan after plan on how to evacuate these people. Nobody listened to us.
Of course, Brian really didn't need to hear that. He's been in Kabul this whole time training the rebels after he killed bin Laden. But there's still some in denial, like this witless water cannon.
95% of the American people will agree with everything he just said. 95% of the press covering this White House will disagree. And for an American president to finally be completely aligned with such an overwhelming majority of what the American people think about Afghanistan is probably a tremendous relief to the American people.
Ugh, talk about brain dead. They should change the name of her show from Deadline to Flatline. I'm not bashing the decision to leave. It's how the atrocious exit negated so much sacrifice. This is truly a man-made disaster. In Biden's speech yesterday, he defiantly defended his botched exit, as if we were critical of leaving. But we weren't. We were critical of his incompetence in carrying it out. Timing is everything in life, Joe. If anybody should know that, it's a man who probably starts his day with FiberCon and a pot of black coffee. People over 60 get that. My core audience. Imagine if Captain Sully had bailed and let his plane crash into the Hudson. Technically, it's still a water landing, but only one gets you played by Tom Hanks. But even if I wanted to defend Biden, I can't. I mean, I do have a nagging question in Joe's defense. If 20 years made no difference on the exit, you think taking another few months would make any difference? But still, it's on Biden. Remember, as president, he said that the number one threat to America wasn't the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, or ISIS. It's millions of white voters. So screw him. He didn't see the Taliban resurgence because he was too busy indulging fabricated adversaries in between photo ops of him licking ice cream cones. And as for the Democrats, it's par for the course. In Afghanistan, just as on the border or in law enforcement, the Dems always embrace what undermines order. They're like a hooker deciding what bra to wear. They choose what comes apart the fastest. I got that from Charlie. As for those documenting the horrors of the Taliban, ask yourself this. Would they have supported an all-out, fast annihilation of Taliban in a world where every attempt to fight radical terror was met with cries of Islamophobia? You would have been called a monster, or worse, a Trump supporter, to suggest such a thing. Taliban leaders were in the president's palace. One missile would have ended that photo op. But how would the chattering classes take to that? Sorry, that swift, brutal action should be reserved only for the insurrectionists at the Capitol. Over here, our effed up media focused on plastic straws, mean tweets, racist Halloween costumes, misgendering, refusing a vaccine, or appropriating another ethnic group's food in the school cafeteria. And of course, social media galvanized mobs to cancel people for bad jokes and bad memes. An entire news network smeared the police nightly and chose to inflame racial tension for ratings for years. Our priorities as a nation were deliberately undermined. Even as our troops toiled, the war became less than background noise. We spent years letting our attention to Afghanistan grow flabby. To paraphrase Harry Chapin, the war learned to walk while I was away. Hell, the war is now old enough to drink and too old for Anthony Weiner to date. And in all that time, we still hadn't prepared for this moment. That's amazing. Imagine you got 20 years to plan on your exit and it's this bad. What were our leaders doing? Too busy destroying this country, I guess. Let's welcome tonight's guests.
Okay, so I put the clip for that in the chat and in the description. If you want to see who his guests were and what they had to say, please go there. It's humorous, if anything, but I didn't feel that I wanted to cover all of that. So I covered what I wanted to cover. Hopefully you heard what I wanted you to hear. And please always read my descriptions. I put a lot more information in there. All right, so that's what I got for you. I will be back. Please join me in about 15 minutes. I will be reviewing John's recent info. And I love you all. God bless. And see you in 15 minutes.